Russian operators stared at their radar screens and saw exactly what they wanted to see. 12 cheap drones against 32 missiles. The numbers spoke for themselves. Victory seemed mathematically guaranteed. But that very confidence was the trap. Because the Ukrainians weren't playing a numbers game. They were playing an attention game. At 4:14 local time, 12 Ukrainian FP2 strike drones launched simultaneously from a classified position in Odessa. The target? The Saky military airfield on the western coast of Crimea. Shortly before, Russia had transferred an additional squadron of Su-30s there to reinforce the peninsula's air defence following a series of Ukrainian strikes that had been gradually cutting Crimea off from the mainland. When the group was still 40 miles from the target, the S-400 Triumph battery near Alamfka detected all 12 signals. The operator looked at the screen and felt no alarm. 32 missiles against 12 drones. The ratio seemed perfectly comfortable. That very calm was the first mistake. The Ukrainian plan wasn't built on strength. It was built on one simple principle. An air defense system, like a human being, cannot fully process an infinite number of threats simultaneously. You just need to make it look the wrong way. The first 3 FP2s sharply gained altitude and pushed their engines to maximum power. An electromagnetic surge swept across the sky within a 15-mile radius. Russian radar screens lit up. That was exactly what the Ukrainians wanted. The first trio was a live decoy, like a magician showing one hand to conceal the movement of the other. 30 seconds later, the second group of 3 drones dropped low, hugging the sea surface at an altitude of around 75 meters. Their thermal cameras turned the dark sea into a grey map of cold and warm patches. The 2 remaining groups held their distance. Their engines were warmed up. Their guidance systems had already locked onto the route. But they weren't rushing. Everything was running on a pre-programmed timer. The S-400 battery commander made the first decision, to open fire on the northern group. 3 9M96E2 missiles left their launch tubes, leaving white columns of fire in the Crimean sky. They accelerated to speeds many times greater than the speed of sound, constantly adjusting course based on ground radar data. Interception seemed inevitable. But the Ukrainian Special Operations Group had been waiting for exactly this moment. The instant the radar warning receivers on the drones detected the transition from ground tracking to the missile's seeker head, all 3 FP2s simultaneously dove downward at an angle of roughly 60 degrees toward the sea surface. The intercept points the missile's onboard computers had calculated instantly ceased to exist. The targets had vanished somewhere the missiles could no longer steer in time. Below was no clear sky. There was the sea. Waves, moisture, foam, chaotic reflections of radar pulses. Doppler filters tried to separate real targets from interference. But at maximum speed, the missiles didn't have enough time to process. They lost lock. Self-destruct mechanisms triggered. 2 flashes above the water's surface. And the first S-400 salvo went nowhere. While the battery crew switched to the southern group, something unexpected happened. The 3 drones in the south simply disappeared from the screen. Not shot down, they simply vanished. They moved deeper into the central Black Sea, descending to 30 meters above the waves. At that altitude, the radar horizon drops. Reflections from the water increase sharply, and the effective radar cross-section of the FP2 is incomparably smaller than that of a manned aircraft. 3 meters of waves, salt moisture, crosswind, and each drone became a blip that appeared and disappeared. The Russian commander called in the S-400 battery near Sevastopol. A second radar began an expanded scan, and the signals appeared again. Faint, low, but real. The southern group wasn't fleeing. It had simply extended its route by just enough for the first battery to lose sight of it, without exceeding its fuel budget. And now it was turning back. This was the most dangerous moment. Turn too early, and you light up on the Saky radar. Too late, and there's not enough fuel for the final acceleration and dive. But for Ukrainian operators, after 3 years of war, such calculations had become routine. Meanwhile, the middle group began its own maneuver. 3 FP2s climbed to around 360 meters and headed straight for the S-400 position. No evasion, no concealment, straight on. The first drone was immediately acquired and destroyed, a clean kill. The second accelerated and continued toward the battery, as if it were the primary strike element. The missile switched to it, began pursuit. But the closer the target came to the launch position, the more acute the dead zone problem became. A missile designed to destroy targets at long range couldn't reconfigure fast enough to hit an object flying directly at it with increasing speed. At that moment, the third FP2, which had appeared to break off the attack and descended to 90 meters, suddenly opened its throttle. While the entire S-400 crew was focused on the second drone, the third came in from an unguarded angle. Nobody was expecting it there, not at that moment. The 200-pound warhead detonated near the battery's position. The explosion tore through the night. The first layer of air defense was knocked out. But Crimea is not a single S-400. It is a multi-layered system. And the remaining 9 FP2s were already entering the airspace of western Crimea. Near Mirny, an S-350 Vityaz battery was waiting for them. It had been tracking the drones for 4 minutes. The 9 M96 missiles launched on an intercept trajectory, hugging the ground like white spears. 2 FP2s were shot down before they could react. The remaining 7 immediately dove into a narrow gorge in the coastal mountain range. This was no graceful evasion maneuver. It was a forced dive into cover, where a deviation of a few meters meant collision with rock. The terrain became a natural screen. The slopes created dead zones for the seeker heads. The missiles lost their targets. One exploded against a rock outcrop. Another slammed into a hillside. When the dust settled, 7 signals reappeared on the screen, dispersed, approaching from 3 different directions, tightening a ring around Saky. The S-350 was not destroyed. It was driven into a situation where every decision came too late. Fire. Risk of false acquisition. Wait for confirmation. The drones move deeper. Switch to optics. Pre-dawn fog and a cold background made the FP2's thermal signatures indistinguishable. The battery ceased fire. 2 shot down and 7 that broke through. In military reports, this is called a partial formation kill. In reality, they missed. Data on the breakthrough was immediately relayed to the Pantsir S-1 on duty at the airfield perimeter. Its radar acquired 7 targets. Speed approximately 180 km per hour. Altitude 120 meters. Range 9, less than 7 kilometers. 2 5.7 E6 missiles were fired. The first destroyed the lead FP2 6 meters from its fuselage. The second caught the drone heading for the aircraft parking area, the range close to 1.5 kilometers. Missiles were no longer viable. The crew switched to guns. 2 automatic 30mm cannons opened fire. Combined rate of fire up to 5,000 rounds per minute. A wall of metal rose before the airfield. Orange tracers streaked across the sky. The passage seemed closed. But the third FP2 had been flying along the outer edge the entire time. Lower, farther from the main direction of fire. When the two lead drones were shot down and the guns concentrated on the frontal direction, it opened its throttle and drove straight at the Pantsir. At a range of less than 1 kilometre, the turret could no longer traverse in time. The last burst went high. The drone did not deviate. Its warhead detonated near the vehicle's combat module. The targeting radar lost signal. The guns fell silent. The last defensive line before Saky was gone. The 5 remaining FP2s entered the hangar zone. Stationed there were Su-30SMs, Su-30S and Su-24S. The squadron just transferred to reinforce Crimea. The first drone struck the northern row of hangars at an angle of roughly 40 degrees. The warhead pierced the thin metal roof and detonated inside. The pressure instantly blew out the doors. A column of fire roughly 40 meters high tore through the roof. The second strike hit the hangar where an Su-30 was undergoing maintenance. Auxiliary fuel, technical oils, and compressed gas cylinders ignited. The temperature inside exceeded 800 degrees. Secondary explosions began. In less than a minute, no fewer than 7 hangars had been hit. Flames rose above 60 meters. On thermal cameras, the hangar zone ceased to be individual fires. It became a single white mass, where the temperature at the center of the blaze could melt aviation aluminium and reduce onboard electronics to scrap metal. Saky was not leveled. It was simply paralyzed through precision strikes on everything that made the aircraft capable of taking off. Hangars, equipment, fuel, personnel. The squadron transferred to defend Crimea never made it into the air. If you're following the developments and want to understand how modern warfare is changing the logic of air defense, subscribe to the channel and hit like. Write in the comments, what do you think will be the next target? Air defense systems? Fuel depots? Or the airfield supplying Crimea? Your opinion matters.